Hello, everyone. Today, I wanted to talk about the New Jersey Devils and what to expect from them this season. Now, first, I just want to get this off of my back. I feel disgusting wearing a Devils shirt. As a Rangers fan, they are one of my least favorite teams, and I feel so wrong wearing this shirt. The only reason I have it is because I played in a tournament at the Prudential Center a few years ago, and these were the shirts that they gave to everyone. So I just hung on to it, and I'm wearing it for this video. But despite the fact that I don't really like the Devils, I don't think people are giving them enough credit. Granted, I do still think that they won't be that good, but that's because of their division. In a normal Metro division, I think that they would have competed to, not for the playoffs, but they wouldn't have been as dead last as they're looking right now. So let's start with the top five. Nico Hirscher, Kyle Palmieri, and I put Jesper Bratt, but you can argue Nikita Gusev, Damon Severson, and Ryan Murray. Ryan Murray, obviously the new acquisition from Columbus, and they got him on a steal. And I am still baffled by why Columbus gave him up for so cheap. And he's going to be a huge piece for if the Devils do take a step forward and aren't last in the division, or even if they compete for a playoff spot. Honestly, that isn't completely out of the question, even if what was expected to happen last year happens this year. Um, Damon Severson, he's probably their number one defenseman, and you don't want that from Damon Severson. Ideally, he's your number three or number four defenseman, I would say. But having him on a top pair is not that good, I think. And while I do like Severson's game, and I think that he's a very solid top four defenseman, as a number one defenseman, I'm not too sure if I'm sold on him as that. Jesper Bratt, um, he always looks really good, and I think he is one of the more underrated players on the team. And nobody really talks about him. Always a solid player, around a point every other game, a little more. And I feel like that he's gonna break out this year. He's really gonna prove himself as a top six player, as a top six forward for the Devils, and he will keep improving. Obviously, I don't think that he's at an elite level. I think in his prime, he'll probably be fringe first, second line. But for what was expected when they got him, that's phenomenal. Kyle Palmieri, last year he was the All-Star for them, and he's arguably their third best player next to Nico Hirscher and Mackenzie Blackwood. And he's a goal scorer, and he's on most teams, I'd probably say a second liner. This is the problem with the Devils, though, is their top end talent. Um, they don't really have many players that you can look at and be like, yes, that's a first line player, or yes, that's a top pairing defenseman. But they have depth, which that depth, if they break out and become top line players, could be a reason why this team breaks through. But Palmieri isn't a top line guy, I think, and he kind of just is forced in that position because he is their best winger. And their best forward, the only player that I would really say is a top line player on the team, is Nico Hirscher. Nico Hirscher is very underrated, I would say. He is phenomenal defensively, and he's starting to be phenomenal offensively, breaking into his own. And if he ended up being a point a game this season, I think a lot of people would be surprised, but I honestly wouldn't. Watching him play, he is by far their best player. And like I said before about him being their only true first line player, it hurts his stats. And if you gave him someone like uh like say you gave him Zibanejad's line mates, Buchnevich and Kreider, I don't think he'd be as good as Zibanejad, but he would definitely be a lot better than where he is now. And those two players aren't even like elite first line players. He just needs a little more help. Especially right now though, he also has to take care of the defensive end because some nights he's their best defenseman playing as a center. Moving on to their bottom five, I have Zajac, Kukanen, probably Bastian, PK Subban, and I have either Vatanen or Kulikov. The reason why I have that is because I feel wrong putting Vatanen as a bottom pair as a bottom two defenseman for them because he shouldn't be a bottom pairing defenseman. But this goes on to the depth of the Devils that I was talking about, where ideally I would say Vatanen is your number 4 defenseman, and he would probably be their number 5 here, and Kulikov will probably be their number 7 defenseman, so in most cases he wouldn't be on this list as a bottom 5 player. But I do think Kulikov is better than, it is a bold thing, but I would say Kulikov is better than PK Subban, at least what we saw last year. And PK Subban is widely known as a locker room cancer. But in Nashville and in Montreal, his talent made up for it. His talent is seemingly disappearing. And when that talent disappears, he's pretty much worthless to the team. And honestly, if he starts the season this year and is looking anything like last year, you send him down to Binningham. And you run with Kulikov and Vatanen as your bottom two. Bastian, I'll talk about him a little more in the rookie section, but he looks solid. He looks like that he could be fringe third, fourth liner, and I have him as a bottom 5 player. Should be a very solid rookie. I do not see him missing out on the lineup. And I like what I've seen with him. I haven't seen much, obviously, but I like what I have seen. Kuokkanen, he's alright. I honestly don't know much about him. And when I was looking up their players, I was like, wait, this guy played last year? He's a bottom line guy. From what I can gather from his stats and a few little things that I've seen about him, he is a bottom line player. And there's not much else other than that. He's fourth liner offensively, fourth liner defensively. I believe he's young. I'm not 100% sure about that, so he could take another step forward and end up being a fringe third liner. And then Travis Zajac, having him on the fourth line is honestly pretty good. He is overpaid, there's no question about that. But in my opinion, he's ideally your third liner. But when you have Hischier, Hughes, and Zacha, it's pretty solid. And I really think that Travis Zajac gets a little undervalued at time because of his contract. But overall, I think he's a very solid, mainly defensive forward, and very good penalty killer for them, even. Moving on to the goalie tandem, this got thrown, like a huge wrench got thrown in their plans recently. So their tandem is Blackwood, and I have that it's either Wedgwood or Sen as the backup. I know that the general consensus seems to be that Scott Wedgwood will be the backup, and I do agree with that it probably will be. But Sen is younger, and I don't think that his skill is that far off from Wedgwood. And there's a better chance of a younger goalie surprising you and being better than you expect than an older goalie. So I could very well see them deciding, you know what? We're going to give Sen a shot. And if he doesn't pan out, we turn to Wedgwood. And the team isn't supposed to be good. So if he doesn't pan out, it won't be a huge failure for the team. Because if they lose games, that just gives them a better pick. But Blackwood, I really like Blackwood. And Blackwood alone could potentially push this team into relevancy again. He's young, he's good, and he's underrated. And I know lumping in underrated into that doesn't really seem logical, but teams won't think much going into it about preparing for this. In my opinion, he's almost elite. I could see him being seen as one of the elite goalies when this new wave of young goalies is done developing. And he could end up being up there with Shesterkin, Samsonov, Sorokin, Hart, Demko, Askarov, and Knight. And he could be like an eighth one into those elite goalies. And if anyone can bring this team forward, it's Blackwood. The one benefit that this team has, where everything looks like it's falling apart, is they have their starter of the future. And while Corey Crawford unfortunately did end up leaving the team, I don't think he would have been the starter anyways. It just sucks that Blackwood can't have a good mentor, which he kind of had with Corey Schneider, but Schneider was way past his prime and he wasn't any good anymore. While Blackwood was there. Going on to your other notable players, I have Jack Hughes, Nikita Gusev, Will Butcher, Ty Smith, Andreas Johansson, and Pavel Zacha. So starting off with Jack Hughes, very disappointing rookie year. Drafted first overall, and really just didn't live up to his potential, it seemed like. But it could have been the first season jitters, essentially, where nervous going into the season, and he just underperforms. And I really do think that he will break out this year. I do not think that he will be all that he was hyped up to be when the draft first started, because after the draft, there seemed to be a consensus of it was a very weak draft class at the top. And every year, no matter how strong the draft class is, the number one pick always gets hyped up like he's going to be the next McDavid. But I still think Hughes will be a very solid option and very strong player for them. Nikita Gusev, like I said, you could argue him over Jesper Bratt. Came over from the KHL, and at least what I heard from my Devil fan friends, he was going to be a savior for them. He was going to put up point-a-game stats, and he just didn't do that. He put up good stats, but he looked like a second liner, ideally, and he fit in decent with the team, actually. They were lucky that they didn't have a situation like whoever that guy was that tried to come from the KHL to Vegas right away. That ended up being scratched some nights. Because you get that risk with KHL players, and they were lucky. He kind of fit right in, and there's a good chance that after a full season of adjusting to North American ice, he could very well end up being a top-line player for them. If all he needed was that one more year of adjustment to the smaller ice. Will Butcher is very interesting. He could either be over Vatanen on the bottom five, or he could be over either Murray or Severson on the top five. He had a sophomore slump last year, but the year before he looked very good. I personally am a big fan of Will Butcher, and I think he is ideally a second pairing defenseman, like almost every other defenseman except for Subban and Kulikov on the team. And I could see in a few years Butcher being their number 2 defenseman. He just looks really good offensively. Sometimes he struggles a bit defensively, but overall he looks solid. And I was all in on wanting the Rangers to get Butcher during that sweepstakes, and was very disappointed when he went to the Devils of all teams. But like I said, I could see him being the number 2 in the future, which is an easy transition into who I think will be their number 1 defenseman, Ty Smith. So I have him listed here. He'll be a rookie this year. So I didn't want to jump the gun and put him as a top 5 defenseman for them, because you never know what can happen with rookies. And he isn't hyped up like a Lafreniere or like a Kaprizov. But he's hyped up by Devil fans a lot. And of what I have seen with him, I do think that he'll be, that if I made this next season, that he would be one of their top 5 players. And I am very impressed in what I've seen with Smith. And if he develops right, and I could see him being around like what Adam Fox was last year, probably not quite as good, small step down, but still phenomenal defenseman, and finally gives them a solid actual top 2 defenseman. And this going back to what I said though, Smith, if he turns out to be a top 2 defenseman, if Hughes takes that next step forward Smith being a top 2 defenseman, Hughes takes a step forward to be a solid top 6 forward, and if Gusev adjusts to North American ice and is a solid top line player, you have a team that can compete for the playoffs, which is very scary to have an 8th competitive playoff team in that division. They're seen as the runts and like you can push them over, but if you look at them like that, they'll surprise you. Andreas Janssen, they got from Toronto in the offseason, again for a bargain of a price because they were looking to shed cap. And there were times where Janssen looked like he was a solid top liner with Austin Matthews. But there were other times where he really didn't impress me. And he looked like that ideally he'd be a bottom 6 forward. Overall, though, middle 6 is probably around where he belongs. And it'll be very interesting to see where he gels in and where he fits in the lineup. I could see possible second line with Brett and Hughes. But it'll be very interesting to see what happens. And now last I have Pavel Zacha, who is their third line center. I expect more from him. I am a fan of Zacha, and when they drafted him early, he's seen as a bust now, and while he is, I feel like that it's like a Nugent Hopkins situation with a bust, where he's not that elite player that you expected when you drafted him. But I still see that top 6 potential in him. And I think that if he's going to reach it, it'll have to be this year. Or at least he'll have to take the next step forward. But I don't know if he'll get the opportunity to really prove that he can be a top 6 forward, though, on this team. Moving on to rookies, I already talked about Ty Smith. Merkley is looking like a solid prospect for them. And I expected him to make the lineup this year, but they just put him on waivers. So he'll probably be on the taxi squad. And with how many injuries they can get, though, I could see him end up cracking the roster through the taxi squad after a few injuries, or God forbid some players get COVID. I could see Nick Merkley jumping into a roster spot and maybe proving he belongs to stay there. Maltsev, I don't know much about him. I know that he has seemed like a 15th forward for them for the past couple seasons. That's at least what I think I've noticed with him, because the name is very familiar, but I don't really think I remember watching him play that much. And will he take that next step forward, and will he be in the NHL? Actually, no. Maltsev, I actually didn't have on the list because I didn't think that he was anywhere near cracking the lineup. But when I showed it to my Devil friends, they almost unanimously told me add Maltsev. He might make it. He seems very good. And the same thing is with Nolan Foote. Well, I am very high on Nolan Foote and think that it was actually a decent pick by Tampa to get him. And then they trade him to the Devils. Nolan Foote could absolutely crack the lineup, but I don't see it this year. I think he needs another year of development. I talked about Bastion a little bit. I do think that he will crack the lineup, and I could see him as a third liner ideally, but he might end up stuck on that fourth line because of the depth of the team. Because I don't think he'll push down a Miles Wood, um, or almost anyone else that I see making the lineup. Okay. Hopefully I don't butcher this. Sharangovich. I have never heard of him before, and when I went to look at their lines to get the list of rookies, he was on there, and I believe he was on the second or third line. And my first thought was, oh, I have to write this whole name on the list. But if I were to tell you he looks like a solid top 6 option, or he looks like that he's going to be a bust, or I'd be lying. I know nothing about this kid. But if he can make the Devils lineup, and if he can be a good top 6 option, it'll be great for them. If not, though, it really wouldn't be that much of a surprise, I guess. And he could make the lineup and surprise some people. That'd be very interesting. Boqvist, I'm expecting big things. In my opinion, you either give him a top 6 spot or you send him to Binningham. Because playing him in the bottom 6, third line is passable, but if you have him on the fourth line, or if he's on the taxi squad, he's not going to develop. And he has a lot of potential. I really like what I've seen out of Boqvist, but they need to really foster that correctly. And I just think it'd be very interesting to see what happens with Boqvist. Does he make the lineup? Is he top 6? Or is he in Binningham? Personally, I see him ending up on the lineup in a third or fourth line role, which I don't think will be great for him. But we'll have to see. Michael McLeod, defenseman. They don't really got many defensemen that are rookies or possible rookies this season. They've got some good defense prospects, which is why they were able to take, I believe it was Holtz in the offseason, in the draft. But McLeod, while he looks good, he's not quite ready for the NHL. But if he surprised us and made it, that'd be great for him. Ball, I don't know much about him. He seems like that as of right now, he would be a number 13 forward. Correct me if I'm wrong on McLeod versus Ball. I wrote those two last minute to add just a couple extra prospects. And McLeod might be a forward and Ball might be a defenseman. But I believe McLeod was the defenseman and Ball was the forward. And Ball honestly doesn't seem that impressive to me. But he's still young and could take the next step forward. Okay, and then just last, I have Sen. Like I said, I don't expect him to make the lineup, but give the kid a try. Give him over the 30-something-year-old Wedgwood to start the season, and if he isn't good enough, you can send him down. Going for my prediction for for the point scorers, I think Nico Hischier will lead the way with 20 goals, 30 assists for 50 points in a 56-game season, taking those small steps forward to prove he is an elite forward and probably future Selke winner, I would think. Jack Hughes, I have second, taking that next step forward. 10 goals, 25 assists for 35 points, which is similar to his points last year, but in less games played, which I think will be very solid for him to be. I think he'll be a solid second line center next year, but you want to see improvement faster than that. I know it's one season, but you want to see him being at least a solid second line center this year, and at the very least 2 years after that be a first line center. Whether he's actually playing on the first line or not is a different story because you got Hischier, but you want to see it be a Crosby Malkin situation where Hughes is so good, but you can't justify putting him any higher in the lineup because you got Hirscher. And finally, I have Kyle Palmieri, third in points. 15 goals, 15 assists for 30 points. And overall, that's just average numbers. I think it's a slight decrease from what his pace was last year, but he is getting older. And with more emphasis on the kids, I don't think that he'll be getting as many opportunities anymore, and the kids will get them more to really play. And I'm going with Blackwood stats. I would have given him 30 games played going into the offseason. I mean, going into this if I made this video 3 days ago. But with Crawford retiring, if Wedgwood or Sen is the backup, unless if they prove themselves early, 45 games played for Blackwood doesn't seem that far off for me. Because clearly they don't trust either one of them to be the backup. That's why they went out and got Corey Crawford. I do have him with a .912 save percentage and a 2.9 goals against. And while I was talking up Blackwood and a .912 doesn't seem that great, when you're overworking him like that, his stats will decrease. I'm expecting him at the start of the year to be around 920s and then get worse and worse as the season progresses. And the 2.99 goals against, it's the Devils. And I really, as much as I've been saying that they can surprise people, if they're not last in the division, I would be very surprised. There's maybe 3 teams that I could see possibly being worse. But that goes to the final point of the video, which is where do I see them ending in the standings? I have them anywhere from 5th to 8th in the East. And while I know I said I can only realistically see like 3 teams being better than them, it has a lot to do with the Islanders. Will their coaching keep them afloat? With the Penguins, will age finally catch up to them? With the Rangers, will this youth actually be able to gel? Washington is the same as Pittsburgh. Buffalo, do they have enough with the new acquisitions to be better? There's a lot of questions in that division, and well, right now it looks like it's a phenomenal division that's almost unbeatable. If all those things happen, you could very well see a team like the Devils not really improve, but make the playoffs. Like I said, though, I really don't see that happening, and I see other teams being much better than them. But I'd be very interested to see what you guys think, and I tried to take a more optimistic approach to a team that's been nothing but torn down by everyone in the offseason. Even though I do hate the team, I think that they shouldn't be taken lightly. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe, and leave a comment if you like what I said or if you think I'm a dumbass. So, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.